Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gary Jenkins, Dean of the University of Minnesota Law School. Welcome to our Minnesota Law students, faculty, staff, and alumni who are joining us today, but also a welcome to the students, faculty, staff, and alumni joining us from the medical school and others who are interested in learning more about Dr. Meredith's work, as well as the important and timely issues we're going to talk about today in our discussion moving forward, the history of racial injustice in education and housing, a conversation with Dr. James Meredith. So I'm thrilled to be hosting this event here at the law school in collaboration with the medical school at the University of Minnesota. First, a special thank you to Christina Chen, a recent graduate of the law school, a student at the medical school, who has been instrumental in bringing this event to us all. Thank you. Today's conversation focuses on the history of racial injustice in education and housing, the killing of George Floyd last summer, and the subsequent killing of Daunte Wright, Winston Smith, and many others continues to drive momentum in addressing police violence against Black people and communities. But we know that racial inequity, the racial inequity story in America, has other chapters. It has other dimensions. There's also renewed momentum in addressing systemic racism, racial injustice in other areas, including housing, education, in the Twin Cities, in the US. As Minnesota's flagship law school and university, we support the Twin Cities community through our teaching, our research, our service mission, and join the national conversation taking place as policymakers and leaders and community members navigate opportunities for positive change. To continue this discussion and learn more, we welcome today an icon and a maverick, Dr. James Meredith, who will be in conversation with our own Professor Myron Orfield. Professor Orfield is the Earl R. Lawrence Professor of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties and the director of our Institute on Metropolitan Opportunity here at the law school. His work focuses on local government law, fair housing, school desegregation, charter schools, land use law, and his research has led to legislative and judicial reforms at the federal, state, and local levels in Minnesota and many other states. Prior to joining the law school, he was a litigator in a large firm, a civil rights lawyer, an assistant attorney general of Minnesota, and was elected to both the Minnesota House of Representatives and Senate. Professor Orfield has served on the National Commission on Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity, as an advisor to the Congressional Black Caucus, an advisor to White House transition teams, and as a special consultant to the HUD's Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity. Thank you for leading our discussion today.
Thank you.
Now, you know, when you grow up in a Black household, you can't help but to hear certain stories, certain names. And one of those stories told, one of those names mentioned with respect and awe is James Meredith, who as a young man exhibited a kind of boldness, dignity, imagination, bravery that few of us have ever been asked to summon. He dared to attend his state university, which at the time was an act of radical boldness. We all know that the Supreme Court decided Brown v. Board of Education in 1954, but change was slow, very slow. 7 years later, after that landmark decision, well into the 1960s, the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss, the public state flagship, I'm going to repeat that. The public state flagship still refused to accept Black students. That was until James Meredith came along, filed suit to have his rights as a citizen and his humanity acknowledged. He eventually became the first African-American student to successfully enroll at the University of Mississippi in 1962, but it wasn't easy. The case wound its way through the federal courts all the way up to the US Supreme Court. Even then, state officials initially refusing a US Supreme Court order to integrate the school blocked his entrance. There were large campus riots that left 2 people dead, but finally, he was able to enroll at the university under the protection of federal marshals directed by Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy. Dr. Meredith, an Air Force veteran, graduated from the University of Mississippi in 1963, and in 1966 began a 220-mile solitary protest march, which he called the March Against Fear, from Memphis, Tennessee to Jackson, Mississippi, to highlight continuing racism in the South and encourage voter registration. On the second day of the march, he was shot by a white gunman and was hospitalized. Civil rights leaders continued the march until Dr. Meredith could rejoin later on. And on June 26, nearly 55 years ago from this date, Meredith and other leaders, including Dr. King, entered Jackson, Mississippi with over 15,000 marchers. And during the march, more than 4,000 Black citizens were registered to vote. Now, he went on to earn his law degree from Columbia Law School. He's been a writer, a speaker, a political advisor. I am so pleased to welcome Dr. James Meredith here today to the law school. Now, as a reminder, today's event is being recorded. A link to the recording will be shared via email following the event. We also have live auto captioning enabled. You can turn that off if you'd like. We will also reserve time to address audience questions submitted via the Q&A feature found on the bottom of your Zoom screen. With that, we're ready to get started. I turn it over to you, Professor Orfield. Thank you, Dr. Meredith. Thank you, Professor Orfield.
Thank you, Dean Jenkins. And it's a great honor to be here with a great American hero, Mr. Meredith, Dr. Meredith, the man who really changed American history by his courage, both in his admission to the University of Mississippi and forcing the federal government to act, and in forcing the country to realize that the Voting Rights Act had passed. And you very rarely meet a person that has individually had such a big effect on American history. When we talked a few days ago, you said you wanted to talk about the significance of what happened in Minnesota last summer and how racial segregation was an important piece of the inequality in our society. You said to me you thought segregation was removal from the society. You said you felt that it was a form of leprosy. Can you talk a little bit about segregation and George Floyd?
Well, I can, but I want to first read a 15-minute thing that it took me 68 years to write. 58, I'm sorry, almost 59. I went to, as he pointed out, Columbia Law School. I never applied to that law school. The Dean Warren of Columbia Law School, like football players, he looked me up and offered me a scholarship to go to Columbia Law School. And I went. After the first semester, he had me come to his office to explain to me why I was there. And he also suggested what courses he thought I should study. Dean Warren was not happy with the 1954 Supreme Court decision. He was less happy with the 1964 Civil Rights Bill and the 1965 Voting Rights Bill. And he said that in order to lead the Black people, what a leader needed to know was the basic history of law. And for whatever reason, I followed his advice, and I studied law from 2,000 years before Moses, Hammurabi, and the Roman law from 500 BC to for almost 300, and the English common law and its development, and Napoleonic Code, or Code Napoleon, but also ecclesiastical law, which is very necessary in order to understand our legal system now. And my real hope is to change the conversation, because no one is dealing with the real issues. And I wanted to read my 15 minutes because I think that lawyers are the most important people in America. And of course, Americans generally think that because they think the Supreme Court is even above the president and the legislature. And I think that's rightly so. But I think that what's happening in Minnesota is crucial to solving this problem. And I want to read as quickly as I can killing by lynch mob in Mississippi and killing by police shooting in Minnesota. According to the archives at Tuskegee Institute, 581 people were killed by the lynch mob between 1882 and 1968, an average of 7.6 a year in Mississippi. Lynch mob as reported by the Star Tribune and on 27 April, don't see as well as I used to, police in Minnesota shot and killed 208 people since the year 2000, an average of 10 a year. The notable thing about killing by lynch mob and killing by police shooting is the legal justification is the same. When everyone does the killing, no one can be charged. When the grand jury says that no crime occurred, no one can be accused. The River Mississippi, the James Meredith Museum fundraising tour starting in Mississippi, in Minnesota, and going down the Mississippi River today and continuing down through the end of the Mississippi River, the Delta. Religion and law. After the adoption of the Constitution in 1787, America became a rich and litigious society. We have over 50 million laws, codes, rules, and regulations. The basis of American law is religious liberty. The world is a place of wonder, mystery, and chaos. Religion answers mystery. Law creates order. Religion and law are not related. Religion is a system of beliefs. Law is a system of dictates. Religion is to solve the mystery. Law is to determine what we can and cannot do. There is a direct contradiction between religion and law. Religion maintains that man is born in sin and is by nature bad. Law says that man is good and noble by birth and capable of self-rule. How do we reconcile this contradiction? We don't. We accommodate the contradiction. We believe that man is basically good and that man is basically bad. This accommodation is possible because in a state of liberty, it is not a man's belief, but his conduct, not his thought, but his actions that are subject to the rule of law. This accommodation is possible because law is pragmatic, not speculative. Law is fact, not opinion. That is why we give juries the power to declare a man innocent or guilty. The end,
Enduring.
Lord have mercy.
The enduring.
The enduring symbol of America is the public square built around the courthouse, not around a church, not a synagogue, not a temple or a mosque. Government and society. The function of government is to protect the enjoyment of the natural rights, life, personal liberty, reputation, family, property, and the pursuit of happiness. The best government is one which affords protection to all and administers justice without discrimination. I have faith in the future. The slavery of Greece, Rome, and other nations before the discovery of America was not marked by race and color. We need two great changes for the good of this country. We must subordinate individualism and exalt society. We must put down the habit of redress of wrongs by individuals and introduce the practice of redress of punishment of crime. We enforce right. It belongs to the state to punish crime, to enforce right, to redress wrong. An individual has no right to undertake this. He usurps the function of government when he does. We must uphold the claims of society, respect it, require individuals to submit to it. Society must be permitted to redress wrongs instead of being done or attempted by individuals. The highest duty of government is to execute justice. Every wrong should be promptly redressed by the state. Every crime and misdemeanor be appropriately punished. We can never enjoy all of the advantages of our country except by repressing the habit of individual redress of injury. The evil habit of individual redress of wrong arises from lax administration of law. This is a great evil. It promotes wrong in various ways. It encourages those who would commit wrongs, and it leads individuals to do for themselves what the state will fail to do for them. If law was followed, rights properly respected by the people, and every wrong promptly punished justly by the state, the consequence would be fewer wrongs, and when one did occur, its redress would be confidently left to the tribunals of justice, and the result would be accepted as right. This is the condition of well-regulated society. We exist in society and must have government. And to have what we should, everyone must renounce the right to redress his wrongs and accept instead that of the state. In no other way can the social principle have its proper sway. In no other way can rights be secured, and the happiness and prosperity prevail. The only need of government is for use. It is not a luxury, but a necessity. It must protect us in the enjoyment of life, limb, liberty, reputation, family, property, and the pursuit of happiness, or it fails on its object and is not worth its cost. The only safety in society is in just laws, impartially and faithfully administered, with none too low to receive their care and protection, and none too high to be subject to their restraint. I appeal to all to strive by teaching and example to bring about this desirable state of things. Slavery and segregation. Slavery is much misunderstood. It has existed as long as mankind. The majority of the people in Greece and the Roman Empire were slaves. Black slavery, however, began with the discovery of America by the Europeans in the 15th century. The Civil War ended slavery as a legal and official classification. The legacy of slavery is still with us in many ways. The main issue today is police and black men. During slavery, every slave owner had a legal duty to police his slaves from the lowest misdemeanor to the highest capital crime. After slavery, the public police was given the job of policing the former slave. The present problem is the limit of the public police power has not been established. The reality is that the public police still has the power of prosecutor, judge, and jury in all cases, from the lowest violation to death. Everybody knows the truth. Nobody wants to deal with it, like it or not. America is going to have to deal with the legacy of slavery. Segregation followed slavery as the economic tool to continue cheap labor. It is more efficient and widespread than slavery. Slavery laid its solid foundation in the 11 southern states after their defeat in the Civil War, called de jure, which was ruled the law of the land by the government of the United States. More importantly, every state and local government established segregation as a policy termed de facto segregation. By the beginning of the 20th century, every state in America was solid segregation because of the fact that the United States of America has been the economic leader of the world. Every other nation has followed suit. 100 years ago, the principal reason for Black injustice was de jure segregation. Today, the main reason for the Black injustice now happening daily in all 50 states is de facto segregation. The only solution to ending Black injustice is to deal with the consequences of segregation, both de jure segregation and de facto segregation. Lastly, how Mississippi got to where we are. Slavery has existed as long as mankind. The peculiar institution of Black slavery began with the discovery of America by Europeans. Most slaves in what is now the United States of America before 1700 were white. When Mississippi became a state in 1817, there were less than 25,000 Black slaves in the whole state. Cotton changed that very quickly. Land, the richest in the world, was taken from the Indians and granted or sold cheaply to the settlers coming into Mississippi from the Old South, bringing their slaves and buying more from up south or from the Caribbean islands. By 1850, Mississippi had the largest percentage of Blacks in America. Cotton was king and Mississippi was cotton. Mississippi had more millionaires per capita than any other state. Cotton production required skilled work. Black slavers did most of this work before the Civil War and continued for the next 100 years under the new slavery called segregation, which was actually worse than slavery. Mississippi has made every policy on the Black-white race issue in America. After slavery, the big Mississippi plantation owners and the Wall Street financiers conspired to keep the Blacks in the cotton field by preventing them from relocating to northern or western states. After the Civil War in 1890, the 1890 Constitution made Blacks second-class citizens, which solved the immigration problem. More important, the Constitution of 1890 in Mississippi established a dual system of criminal justice, one for whites and one for Blacks. America made a new policy. Mississippi can supply this new reality. America needs a new policy. I believe in Mississippi world. My last mission from God is to start a Bible Society reading group in every county in Mississippi, encouraging families to read the Bible from cover to cover and to uplift the moral character of America by teaching the 10 Commandments and the Golden Rule. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Meredith. What a beautiful speech.
Took me 58 plus years
Well, every word is
to write it.
is wonderful. One of the things you said is the only solution to ending Black injustice is to deal with the consequences of segregation, both de jure and de facto segregation. What do you mean by that?
Some of the most educated people in America don't know the difference between the two. De facto segregation is at least 1,000 times more effective than de jure segregation. De jure segregation is the one, and I believe it was 1896 or the Plessy decision.
Plessy, yes.
I mean, where the Supreme Court ruled that blacks could be separated,
Yes.
but they had to have equal facility.
So what you're saying is this de facto segregation is much more harmful than the desegregation by law.
The
Because
main reason is because the people who enjoy it, who do it, don't realize what they're doing.
yeah.
I mean,
People think today that we're segregated because that's the way people want it, that Black people want to be segregated, white people want to be segregated. This is everyone's preference. We don't need any laws anymore because everybody's just decided where they want to live. What do you think of that?
I think that really, what I'm really hoping, see, there's so much trickery in American law. I mean, we say we took common law from England, but we got rid of common law. I mean, the jury system is used, and it has been principally used in where police took over the duty of the owner.
Yes.
No, now everybody blaming the police on all sides. I mean, but actually the legislator is the lawmaker. And however long it's been since the Civil War, they ain't never touched this issue. I mean, and there's so many things. I think the biggest thing is the separate but equal. I mean, that's such a fraud. I mean, what most people don't know, Lord knows, I want to go back down that Mississippi River and don't be hanging from one of these trees in Minnesota. But the truth of the matter is, the first time Black slavery was made illegal and official was the issue in 1787 of the Constitution of the United States in representation. Every lawyer know that, and everyone pretend they don't. I mean, and basically, everything else has followed suit. That is I don't really know what the judges that wrote the opinion in Plessy used for the separate but equal. But they didn't have to go no further than the Constitution of the United States. Right. Because in the Constitution, they wasn't even legal by no means. I think it, whatever it is, I mean, but the significance of me, I've been trying to calculate how I could benefit. And this is another thing. Lord, let me shut my mouth and just turn around, look at you, and
Well, that's
stop
fine.
looking
I
at
think
that
you've
blue light.
answered all the questions that I could ask. But I think this idea that where you're saying that the only solution to ending Black injustice is to deal with the consequences of segregation.
Most people have never thought of it.
Yes.
Most Blacks have never allowed themselves to think about it.
Why not, do you think?
Oh, I can't speak for nobody but me. But I lied about it. I'm 88 years old. I must have, how many years, that's my lawyer. It came all the way from Mississippi. Another doctor came all the way from Pennsylvania. I mean, because I've been talking to them for years. But they couldn't figure out why I was scared to talk to the world so everybody could deal with this issue. I mean, because everybody knows what the issue is. I mean, ain't nobody don't know. And I know a whole lot of people in Minnesota know. But they ain't talking about it. I mean, look, I was told yesterday by a source that I don't have no reason to believe that they were not telling the truth. And they cited a major newspaper as the source. I think it was 15 or 20 years ago, Minnesota had the record of the least amount of segregation of any state in America. But guess what? The report was day before yesterday. Minnesota had the highest rate of segregation in America. But Minnesota is not ashamed of that. I'm ashamed of Minnesota.
Yeah, that's right. And one of the things that people say is, one of the popular theories in education here now is that the HBCUs were the model for education. What we need to do is to have hundreds of those separate single race Black charter schools like the HBCUs. That's the solution to inequality. Do you think that's a viable?
All you got to do is look at the charter schools that exist now. And at least there have been close to 100 of them established in Minnesota in the last 10 years. I mean, and I would guarantee you they are more segregated than the suburbs. I mean, and you understand, everybody talking about the George Floyd case. The Brooklyn Center case is 1,000 times more important, because the Brooklyn Center case, most people in America never heard of the Brooklyn Center. But in the last 10 years, they are really they're all over America.
That's right. One of the things that people say is, we've gotten past this. You know, we've passed these laws, we've passed the fair housing laws. And what these laws are really about was protecting individuals from discrimination. There's no obligation for the government to create open housing. There's no obligation. The word integration isn't in the 1960s.
Look, the government is the people. And the government is the one that established that Black separation in the first place, and they're the ones who have continued to establish it, and everybody, including me, that knew that, been scared to say it. And I'm still scared, but I got these people done paid their own way. Oh, I forgot to mention that she paid her own way too. Then come up here to see if I'm gonna pretend like I don't know the truth again and lie. I mean, but you understand, the story I told you about Columbia University, it was only in less than a year that they wrote in their paper and acknowledged that I was there, that I ever been through there. Ole Miss was almost that long. I mean, but you see, the last article they wrote, I thought you had read it because they talked about Jane Meredith and social justice. But for over 50 years, they never mentioned the name Jane Meredith. I mean, they knew the story about me and the dean, but they didn't say a word about it. I mean, so everybody in America, ain't nobody don't know that segregation is not just, they used to take lepers out of and put them outside of the rest of civil society. But the thing about a leper, they could get back into the society. But the reason they killed this boy out there with the funny name 5 years ago was because he was crossing the border. He was moving from the removed colony into even the governor of the state came out in public and made a statement saying if he had been a white man, he'd still be alive. And everybody pretend they didn't know what the governor was talking about. But ain't nobody in Minnesota didn't know what the governor was talking about. And when one of these fellas got killed, the present governor made the statement that sometime recently was the first time any police officer had been brought into the justice system. And that statement, everybody pretended like they didn't know what he was talking about. But actually, he really wasn't talking about nothing. It's just like now. I better hush my mouth.
Well, no, you're doing a great job. I mean, this is, I think, really centrally important to what we need to hear. You come to Minnesota, and you've said to me that this is the most important place in the country right now.
Because Mississippi used to be the people who could make the laws for black and white, and it would work all over America. Today, it is Minnesota, because Minnesota has a population different from any other in America, and it has a history. You have in Minneapolis, Minnesota, close to 200 independent, separate political entities. One of the biggest tricks pulled on the people was assigning the prosecutor to the George Floyd case. And that was done only to pull the wool over the eyes of the ignorant public. Didn't have nothing to do with nothing legal. I mean,
and what was it that was under, you talk about this was nothing much, but what was underneath all this? What was the real issue that was happening? What did we really need?
Look, however long it's been since the Civil War, or better yet, since the introduction of the Constitution of the United States, the idea of separating blacks has been an American public policy. But for years, they blamed it on Mississippi. In the worst year of lynching, Mississippi lynched more people than the public police killed in Minnesota. But everybody pretend like they don't know that.
What is it, Minnesota, in 1993, there wasn't a single segregated school in the Twin Cities. Today, there's 170 schools.
Because of public policy. They made this public policy somewhere in the 1980s. That Mississippi when I went there, said, we ain't gonna let you come here and dance with our girls. That was in the 60s. In the 80s, Minnesota did worse than that.
Yeah. They abandoned a lot of
Yeah, I mean, and the people in Minnesota don't know what's happened, but the leaders in Minnesota know for sure what's happening. I mean,
So what should we do? I've got one more question, and then we're going to turn it to the audience. But we're in Minnesota. It's a place that used to do these civil rights things, and as you said, we stopped our civil rights enforcement in the 80s and 90s. How do we turn it? How do we turn it back? How do we get to where we ought to be as a country?
my thinking is, now, you know, I really think if anybody deal with the first 3 lines of this speech, I better get my copy.
Okay,
No, yeah, this is it.
that's it.
I'm gonna read them. And everybody, not just lawyers, know where this comes from, but everybody pretend they don't. After the adoption of the Constitution in 1787, the basis of American law is religious liberty. Thomas Jefferson wrote the religious liberty. He also wrote the religious freedom in the Constitution. Not to speak of what he wrote, but everybody know that Thomas Jefferson did that, but everybody pretend that they don't.
Yes, that's really true. So one of the things we want to know is what kinds of steps can we take to try to open up housing and to
Look, the 2 governors,
yeah.
the one presently and the one before him, knew exactly that the legislator are the only ones that can even approach this, dealing with this problem. Mm-hmm. The governor can't, even the judiciary can't, only the legislator. But the governor has to call the legislature in a special session because an issue like this can only be done in special session.
Yes.
I mean, it can never happen in regular session. I mean,
yes.
But the governors.
So they should call a special session, what you're saying, to address segregation and to address these issues in housing.
To address the legacy of slavery. Look, the New York Times thing started a couple of years ago, a teaching of 1919. That was a bigger fraud than what has happened in Minnesota. I mean, and you see, emotion is what dominates American present politics. We have a crisis in America. Now, generally, I'm supposed to leave politics alone. I mean, I'm only supposed to deal with 5 things. Never lie, always tell the truth, don't say nothing negative. I've been saying all the yeah. Don't say nothing controversial. That's all I've been doing today. And only speak about God and Jesus Christ because they represent right and good.
Yeah.
and that will straighten everything out. But politics controls the world. And anybody that went through the pandemic and don't realize that ain't smart like they ought to be. Ain't nothing ever gonna be the same again after this pandemic. And if we don't change some of, you see, law and order ain't about no unreal. Law and order is real. But if you don't have justice somewhere, it will soon come clear to the world. I mean, it's already come clear to blacks. This thing they call black on black crime, even blacks been calling on the police to keep my neighbor from breaking in my house. Or if I step on his foot, he shoot me. Why did you shoot him? He disrespected me, stepped on my foot and didn't excuse me like I wanted to hear. I mean, everybody know the truth, but everybody want to live the lie. I mean, and I'm hoping that anybody read, I guarantee you, any one sentence that I wrote is a legal principle that you could find lawsuits and cases of 100,000 pages. I mean,
Eternal principles of justice. These are eternal principles of justice you're talking about.
Absolutely, from 2000 BC. I mean, and that's what my dean told me. The reason I brought you here, boy, he didn't call me boy, I mean, is that what your people need is leadership.
On civil rights and segregation.
And here's an example. He said the reason that these law schools made the decision, instead of bringing one black in, or 0 black every year, in 1964, they raised that quota to 15. No, Harvard was the first. In 1965, Columbia say we're going to upscale Harvard. They went 16. At Columbia, that was more than twice as many as had been admitted in over 300 years. Maybe not admitted, but had graduated from the school. Now, and my dean told me that all they deans decided they were going to teach them was constitutional law. And he said when they studied that, they spent all their life studying constitutional law. And then when they win a case, they don't get nothing. This was 1964, he told me that. And he said his example was the 1954 Supreme Court decision. I mean, and it would be as true today as it was then. I mean, I'm sorry.
Well, you've been talking about these issues. You've been talking about segregation at the heart of this inequality. And it was part of your life struggle to open up Mississippi and to open up voting. Why do you think that that researchers and philanthropies don't want to talk about segregation anymore? Why nobody wants to talk about it?
Because they know that it is not just separation. It goes back to slavery itself. Everybody knows that they couldn't teach slaves how to read and write. If a master was caught teaching or his wife or his children, they would be punished. Now, when the
You're talking about why they didn't want to talk about segregation.
Right. I mean, Lord have mercy.
You said a lot of things today.
Right. I mean, this is really important because I'm fixing to really get in trouble now because I'm fixing to jump on religion. Boy, I tell you,
Yeah.
don't nobody else know, but you know what
I
my
know,
problem is.
Yes. Yeah. Let's have let's go ahead. Let's see. One of the audience was asking about. They said, "How can I influence without authority in my suburb to help negate the effects of housing discrimination? How can I in my suburb try to resist the effects of redlining and housing discrimination?"
Change the public policy.
Okay. So you've been saying. How about you? One of the other questions is, what are your views on the recent challenges to affirmative action in schools and employment?
Affirmative action was another government fraud to fool the ignorant people. And it's enough of that.
So it doesn't get to the real issue underlying all of this.
And everybody know the real issue is the legacy of slavery and the consequences of segregation. Do you know what impact having to go into a building and see a sign on a restroom, white only? Most blacks have never allowed themselves to acknowledge that they obeyed that. They say all the rest of the blacks obeyed it, but I didn't. I know I'm telling the truth because guess who did it for 86 of my 88 years? I say I ain't never obeyed one of them signs. That's what y'all did. But guess who did it too?
We have a few minutes just to round this up. And one of the things that you had written, I read you an editorial you wrote in CNN, and you said that I am George Floyd, and you said that just to deal with the policing issues is important, but it's not enough. Maybe we can finish with, what did you mean by that?
I not only was George Floyd, I was the Scottsboro boys, and they were lynched before I was born. I mean, and I was every other black. Even the president of the United States, the former president, President Obama, I've heard him many times on television say that he could have been Trayvon Martin, that he heard car doors clicking when he walked across the street. This ain't just anybody. That's the president of the United States.
And you said that we have to deal with the police, but that's not enough.
No. Police ain't the problem. Police are being unfairly blamed. The legislators are the problem, both in the national, but more particularly in the state. I mean, don't you understand what happened? The local government is the state. The intermediary governments and the local government is the state. And when the state take, and oh man,
I know what you mean.
I'm gonna obey.
Well, how can you tell us? We have a bunch of people here from the law school that are listening to us. We've got practicing lawyers, we've got law students, we've got people in the civil rights community.
I'm gonna ask the question. what is considered a good lawyer? What most people think is a good lawyer is when you're guilty and you can pay them enough money and he gets you free. That might be good for that person, but I ain't so sure how good that is for society.
And a good lawyer ought to be what?
It ain't the lawyer. The issue with the lawyer was the issue most raised by Jesus Christ. And I'm going to let that alone. The problem in America is the people who are supposed to make the laws don't make the laws. Look, do you know that a policeman in dealing with who he thinks is a member of this is the prosecutor? He decides. He's the judge and he's the jury. Usually take a jury to deal with a death case, but the police, because they replaced the slave owner, that the people who stopped slavery have no will to do that job. And there ain't nobody don't know that what I'm saying is the truth.
Well, this has been a fabulous afternoon, and your speech, I read it with you as you were reciting it. It was a beautiful speech. Every word was important. Every thought was important.
Every sentence is a book.
Every sentence is a book, and we're honored that you gave it to us, and we're going to read it again and again, and we're going to try to take from what you've been working on for all these years and listen to you and follow your advice. And we want to thank you for coming here. It's an honor for us at the law school.
Thank you.
To have a pioneer like you here at our law school, and we will remember it always that you came to see us.
And if anybody in the audience want a copy, I got a bunch of them.
Yeah,
You're going to bring them to me.
We'll make sure you get them. We'll put them on the
And I'll
website.
make sure everybody in here get a copy.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Dr. Meredith, for coming again.